All right. Well, if you're watching this podcast, you're noticing my very beaten up fancy hat. And this hat is a sign of me being in the south of France. I've just returned from a week-long camp with Gavin Bryars in the French Pyrenees Mountains. A absolutely fantastic week of artist residence. It was a week alongside another dozen of musicians, composers, and it was a week full of music and chats and exchanges and discoveries and new things to learn and to explore, and of course lots of music. And I'm returning to London tomorrow, but given the fact I've literally just returned from Toulouse, I wanted to talk a little bit about this wonderful thing that is called collaboration. And I'm saying this wonderful thing because us artists, composers, musicians, mostly composers, we live a very solitary life. By nature, we need to be isolated in order to create our music. And although we do exchange with musicians and performers and collaborators, it's nowadays often done virtually. And a lot of the things that I do and a lot of the artists I work with, I almost never meet them in real life. I meet them online, I organize calls with them, I write them emails, but I rarely meet them. And sometimes it's because of the distance. They live in far, far away countries, or sometimes it's just a matter of convenience. But after a week like this one, I'm sort of reflecting on it, and I'm sort of thinking, I think one of the greatest thing I must have taken from that week, aside from Gavin Bryars lecturing us on his stunning career and showing us the secrets of his music, and doing this in such an informal way that it's become a really unique sort of experience. But over that, there's this situation of being about a dozen musicians stuck in a wonderful house for a week, 5 days, and exchanging musicians coming from all around the world, some of them living in Thailand, the others in the US, others in the UK, Sweden. I mean, really bits around the world, and all of us being in this house, sort of connecting through our passion and our love for music, for creating music, for playing music, and for listening to music. And if it was a week where I didn't really know what to expect, it's the first camp that I'm doing, and therefore I wasn't really quite sure what to expect from this week. But actually there was a lot of music being played, and spontaneously, in the forms of free improv or just exchanging ideas with our instruments. And it really made me think of the sort of power of being connected in real life to each other through our music, and how being in a situation of sharing music also makes us helps us to become close very quickly, because it's a wonderful language, and you're in a room with people that you've met a day before, but all of a sudden you're doing all this music, you're exchanging all those ideas, and you sort of, through the form of improvisation perhaps, you start to discover them and understand where they're coming from, and what their background is, and all this through the music that they're doing, because obviously everyone has its own language and its own musical grammar, and you sort of discover it as you play with them. And And we ended up doing lots of collective improvisations, and I have to say these were some of the highlights of this week, because it really brought us, mostly composers and producers, it brought us back to the why of our profession, and the reason why we love music so much, and it's that connection that exists through music. And really it made me think, we're now almost friends all together, and of course we're going to stay in touch, and I hope we're going to collaborate, and I hope we're going to keep that energy that we have up. But the only thing I'm thinking of is I cannot wait to hopefully see them again and return to that place, or to another place, and connect with them again in that way. I'm convinced that I'm going to return to London in 24 hours, and life will take over again, and I'm not going to have contexts like this where I can exchange with so many musicians. There could be options. I mean, of course, there's plenty of music venues, there's plenty of places where people can play together, but there's a sort of special thing that exists through that sort of context that we've been placed, that we place ourselves in, and really that was the one thing I just wanted to talk about today in that podcast. It was how our perception of music changes as soon as we bring back the human nature of it, and how, as much as we all love writing music in our isolated world, because that's also what we like as composers, there is something very rich from spontaneous playing with others. What was really interesting as well is that we weren't all on the same level in terms of our careers, in terms of our educations. Some were professional performers, others were professional composers, others were musicians, very good musicians that treat music as a hobby. Some were a little bit like me, in between two worlds. And it's really interesting because when you start playing, and when you start communicating through the instrument that you have, all of this sort of fades out, and it doesn't really matter whether you've been, whether you hold a PhD in music philosophy, and whether we were joking about it, whether you know what a super Locrian scale is or not. It really doesn't matter, because in the end it's all an exchange, and everyone has something to say in his or her own way. And it really made me think how what mattered the most is perhaps the message that you're trying to pass, the emotions that you're trying to pass, rather than how you're trying to pass them. And yeah, it really was. It's been 5 intense days, intellectually, emotionally. I mean, it's been music nonstop. But I think the one of the main takeaway that I've got from this is really that exchange, that human connection that was created, and the fact that I've met this wonderful group of people, and that within the space of a week we've created that thing that we've shared together. And there's some of these that we've recorded, and I hope we're going to be sharing some of these with the world, but others that have been in the moment. It's the nature of improvisation, and therefore only us will remember this, and that's something that I thought was really great as well. I tend to perceive my music, and I was talking about this with one of the guys actually. I tend to see my music as a finished product once the recording is done and released, and I'm always a bit frustrated to see just notes on a piece of paper, because I feel that it's not alive yet. And I also give a lot of importance to the production aspect of music. So my sort of feeling of satisfaction and the way I go from one project to another is through finalizing a recording and thinking I've sort of stopped that moment in time, and that's a musical picture of where this music is at that stage of my life. But then, you know, it also made me think of all those moments where you know, they happen in a moment and then they're gone. And I'm gonna finish on something that I shared as well, and I sort of reflected again on it. How Keith Jarrett would often mention his concerts, begging people to stop listening to it and begging people to stop talking about it, because, well, the concert was in '75, I think, and we've all been really obsessed with that concert because it was it's a hell of a musical moment in history. But he's mentioning how that was one moment out of many others, and it just happens that this moment was recorded and is now sort of stuck in time. But there's plenty of other moments that he's lived and that the audience has lived, you know, and the musicians he's played with have lived, and those moments are only in their memory. And it's quite an interesting sort of thing to remind yourself of when it comes to music, and particularly today when our best way to communicate music is through our recordings, because we all live in our little bubble, virtual bubble, and yeah, I thought it was interesting to talk a little bit about this and just sort of remind ourselves of what the beauty of music is when it comes to connecting us, strangers. I think I'll use that video as a reminder for myself as well in the future when I sort of go into producing my music again in my geeky way, and in the wee hours of the morning, the late hours of the night. So yeah, if you've watched that video, thank you, first of all. Remember that all those podcasts are on Spotify. The link is right below that video, and we really love if you'd support this page. I'm trying to do a podcast a month, and hopefully if this podcast interests enough people, then I'll increase the frequency, and I'll get better equipment. However, what else do you need when you have this beautiful weather that's behind me, and you probably can't hear it, but you have the beautiful sound of South of France and the cicadas right behind me, and the weather is lovely, and I have no will to go back to London tomorrow, but that's how it is. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you in a bit.